This is Jenny Carroll, Library Director of the Mary Riley Stiles Public Library. Today is July 7th, 2022, and I will be interviewing longtime library volunteer and board member Chet DeLong. This interview is taking place at Meridian High School in Falls Church, Virginia, and is part of the Mary Riley Stiles Public Library Oral History Project. Welcome, Chet.
Thank you.
So we're going to start at the beginning with the questions. Can you tell me what it was like growing up in Washington State and Alaska in the 1930s?
Well, yes, to a certain extent, I can say that in the early 30s, you'll recall that was we were beginning to come out of the Depression. Mm-hmm. And things were pretty tight in our family, at least, in the early 30s. But by mid-30s, my dad had found a decent job, and in fact, it was the lighting of the floating bridge across Lake Washington, which he helped to engineer. He is an engineer. And the Alaska part came in the late 30s when Dad got a job with the Northern Mining, Refining, and Smelting Corporation, which actually is a name for the gold mine operation up there. And they ran the whole city because they provided steam heat for all their houses in the city, and he was in charge of the power plant, and the power plant that supplied not only the city but the outlying dredges, gold dredges. And so he worked by traveling around to each of the gold mine dredges. I shouldn't say mine because it was an open placer type gold mining, and took care of the electrical needs for the company and the town.
Mm-hmm. Did he ever bring any gold home?
Did he ever?
Bring any gold home?
No, but we have one picture of him standing with 3 gold bars from one of the dredges in his hands. Now, each bar weighs 80 pounds, so that was 240 pounds. And what they did was they handed him the second and third bars, took the picture, and then took the bars away because it was quite a load. But that was I've forgotten how much a gold bar was worth, but 80 pounds of gold was quite a bit even then.
Yeah. And tell me, you talked a little bit about your dad. How about your mom?
Well, Mom was raised by her father because her mother died when she was 8 and her sister was 6. Mm-hmm. She went to school in Seattle also, Queen Anne High School, and she met Dad at a friend's place, and when they subsequently married, she began doing some kinds of art things, and later on she became quite a painter. We have a house full of her paintings, and she sold quite a number of them and gave a larger number away.
Wow. So did you always know what you wanted to study and where you wanted to go to school?
No, I really didn't. I sort of backed into being interested in science because I read one year the book by Paul de Cruyff, forgotten its title, but it was a nonfiction book about science, and I really took to it. That was in 1936 or 7, somewhere in that time frame.
So what area of science interested you the most?
Well, I can't really answer that because it was sort of an indefinable interest in science without a specific area until I actually had gone to college and chosen a biochemical area later. But it didn't come that early. It came after college, or after I'd started college.
At the University of Washington, right?
No. I graduated from the University of Washington with a BS in chemistry and physiology, but my first college was the Seattle Pacific University, which at that time was called Seattle Pacific College, and a free Methodist college, which I did not really like much, but I spent my first 2 college years there.
Okay. So what were your impressions of the University of Washington, where you finished?
Well, that's where I had wanted to go, but my parents wanted me in SPC. The University of Washington was a much more attractive area for me because it had a much wider selection of courses and things that I could do. But you do what your parents tell you.
So going back, I guess, a little bit, because you were in the military in between, or I guess around the University of Washington time and before meeting Carol.
Well, no, it was July 1, 1943, when I was tapped to go into the U.S. Navy V-12 program. And I was in that until December 45, when they abruptly quit funding it.
So, what was that program?
Navy V-12, it was a program to send people to various and sundry schools for that would support Navy needs, for training that would support Navy needs. So that's that.
So once the program was done, then you were no longer in the military.
That's correct.
Okay. Do you remember how you felt when you learned that World War II had ended?
Well, let's see. That was August of 45. I guess I don't remember exactly how I felt, but I guess I was relieved that I would not have to serve a long time in the military because I didn't particularly like it.
What didn't you like about the military?
Oh, you have to do this, you have to do that, and they are quite rigid. I took a Christmas trip from Milwaukee, where I was stationed at the time, to Detroit to visit my mother's sister and her husband and children. And I took the airplane, the tri-motor Stinson airplane across Lake Michigan to Detroit. And when I came back on the plane, it was 25 minutes late. So I was about a half hour late getting back to the hotel where we were barracked. And the naval captain called me in the next morning and upbraided me for being late. And he said, if you were going to stay here much longer, I would give you some punishments. But he said, we received notice that you're going elsewhere. So I got out of that.
So then after you were in the military, had you already graduated from college?
No.
You went back and finished college?
Yes.
Okay. And so what did you do after you graduated from college?
I spent I graduated from the University of Washington in '48, and I immediately went to work for General Electric at Hanford, because they were beginning to build a biology unit there, and I got in on the planning of the actual building and how to renovate one of the process buildings into a biology lab. And then I got to work with the biology people in some of their plutonium and rat experiences, and also some of the, we had tritium available, and we did some work on skin penetration of tritium. That work was published.
Oh, okay. And so how long were you at GE at Hanford?
And what?
How long were you at General Electric?
From 48 to 52.
Okay.
I left them to go back to college at Pullman to get a graduate degree.
Okay. And you had met Carol in 52? 52? Okay. So then how did you meet your wife, Carol?
I'm sorry, how did I meet her?
Yeah.
Yes. I had decided in 1950 that I had accumulated enough money from my work at GE to go back to school. And so I had been taking some extension courses at Washington State College, which is now Washington University. And so in '52, I decided to go there full-time and get a PhD in chemistry. Carol, who was graduating from NJC, which is the New Jersey State College for Women and is now part of Rutgers, had an advisor who told her to, quote, go west. And Carol sent applications to the State College of Washington and to the University in Oregon, the University of Oregon at Corvallis. And she wanted to go to Corvallis because she had an aunt and uncle living there, and she could live with them for a while until she got squared away. And so she got a response from both, but the telegraph strike delayed the Corvallis response because they didn't send it by telegraph. And how did that work? She got a letter from University of from the State College of Washington before she got one from Corvallis. So she decided to accept the State College thing and start there in 52, September of 52.
And so at what point, at some point, you got married?
Well, when I was leaving in February 56 to come back east to take a job with the CIA, I decided to ask her to marry me because we had been dating during the 4 years, almost 4 years I was there, and we went out for a walk on the campus golf course, and I proposed to her. It was 18 below out there, so we didn't tarry very long. She wouldn't give me an answer then, but did later. She thought it over. She's never one to make a snap decision, but that was quite an experience to do, and people thought we were crazy to go out there in midwinter, but that's...
How long did she make you wait?
I guess it was about 6 months later, and I then sent her a ring to seal the engagement. So that was about 6 months, I guess.
And so what was the decision to move back to Virginia? How did you decide to move back to Virginia in 1956?
I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure the meaning of your question.
So you said that you had decided to move back to Virginia, back to the East Coast. And what went into that decision?
Oh, well, I was offered a job with Central Intelligence.
Okay.
And we looked around because some of my CIA colleagues lived in Maryland. I suggested we live in Maryland. And Carol said, no, let's live in Virginia because it's closer to where you're going to be working. So we rented for 4+ years in Arlington before we bought the house in Falls Church.
And how was life different on the East Coast from the West Coast?
Well, it's a little hard to compare because I hadn't been on the West Coast for several years when we came east, but things are much busier here in terms of practically everything and more developed. The pace of life was a little bit faster here.
And how was it, what was it like to work for the Central Intelligence Agency?
Well, when I was recruited, I was reluctant, and so they upped their offer, and I finally said, okay, but I will only work there for 3 years. 12 years later, I moved to the Veterans Administration Bureau of Medicine and Surgery. But I did enjoy the CIA stint because I did studies on Russian medicine and pharmaceutical industry and that sort of thing. And it was, again, those things were published. It was a fascinating place to live.
So why were you reluctant to work for the CIA?
Well, it didn't have a particularly good reputation, and I was not thinking about working for the government at all when they made the offer. So I sort of shuffled it to one side. I was thinking of working for Dow, and actually the Dow offer was less than the CIA offer. So I took the CIA offer.
Did the CIA recruit you
Yes.
from the University of Washington?
No,
No,
State College, Washington.
State College of Washington. Okay. Why was it important for the United States to know about Russian medicine?
Well, it was a part of a whole picture because it was actually a very small part because the CIA was interested in the broad aspect of all of the activities of Russian industry and research. So this was just one small piece of what the CIA was interested in. It was, you know, they were interested in the missiles, and they were interested in all of the space-related activities, and so their interests were very broad, and that was just a tiny piece.
Did you travel at all to Russia?
No.
During that time?
No, they wouldn't let me. Heavens no, they wouldn't let me travel. I was never acknowledged as openly as a CIA person, and I did mingle with a couple of the Russians when they came over to meetings, but always under a rubric of just being a scientist.
So can you talk a little bit more about what you were doing for the CIA, or is that
pretty much yes? Because it is now all published. I helped write 1, 2, 3 monographs for the thing, and we did a lot of briefing of other government agencies about the Russian advances and work in the field of the agency, and I gave a long briefing with a big thick book to back it up to NIH director at the time. So we did a lot of open work. It was called official use only at the time, but it is now just open to the public. So those monographs were, again, published.
Do you have strong memories of Cold War events such as the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Such as?
The Cuban Missile Crisis?
Oh, that's an interesting question because CIA had given me, after that was, I'd only been working there 5 years, had given me a year's leave of absence to go to NIH to learn a new technique and because they thought it might be useful for the study of the Russian work. So I was actually at NIH working when the Cuban Missile Crisis came. I called my CIA boss and said, do you want me to come back? And he said, no, just sit tight and keep doing what you're doing. So I didn't get involved in the missile crisis.
Mm-hmm. How about any other Cold War related events?
No, I was pretty much out of that end of things. Now the CIA people in the missile area and that sort of thing were deeply involved in all that, but not me.
Mm-hmm. And then you moved to the Veterans Administration after CIA.
I moved to the Veterans Administration Department of Health and Medicine,
Mm-hmm.
Bureau of Medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that because my next door neighbor in Falls Church happened to be the administrator of the Veterans Administration, and he kept urging me to come work for the VA.
Mm-hmm.
So I was about 12 years into the CIA by then, and I was looking for something different, and so I went to work for the Bureau of Medicine and Surgery in the VA, and that's where I stayed for 25 plus years.
Mm-hmm. And how is the work at the Veterans Administration different from the CIA?
Well, in the first place, I wasn't studying a foreign work in the field. I was given responsibilities for the upgrading of medical and associated health training in the VA, and what the first job was to run a series of meetings to get people to improve their skills, and what we did was to fund one kind of one type of medical area, and we then had to set up a committee to choose who should be funded and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And it all worked out that I finally was responsible for the evaluation of those things too. And one other thing was that later on in the VA, the Tiger Teague, the congressman, wanted a new medical school in his state. So what he did, against the advice of the VA, was to give the VA $500 million to build 5 new state medical schools. Mm-hmm. And so we were put in charge of selecting the place and providing that sort of help. We again ran this by committees, and chose committees to go study the place where the new medical school was and make recommendations about how it should work and so on. And we also, as part of that same bill, he funded associated health training. And so we were able to place funds at various medical schools to upgrade their associated health training. So, of course, this involved committees to help decide where to put funds and that sort of thing. And I ran some of the committees.
So you'd mentioned that you had moved from Arlington to the city of Falls Church.
Yes.
And what were your impressions of Falls Church during that early period of the 1960s?
Well, it was a very small town, and in roving around to choose a place to live, we had noticed the Tyson's Corner area, and there was a corner with a store on one side, and that was Tyson's Corner. But we found a house in Arlington by a lone builder. He had a nice little ranch-type house in Arlington, and we looked it over, and he said, "I'm building one in Falls Church too. It's a two-story rambler." And so we went over and looked at it, and that was the one we chose to buy. And we watched its construction from ground zero. Got to choose the bathroom tile colors and that sort of thing. Anyhow, Falls Church at that time was, for example, our street was a bit of broken oiled road. It was not paved. And Broad Street was pretty much as it is now, except almost no trees, and the entire area was sort of skimpy in houses because they hadn't started the house building craze yet. For instance, the farmhouse that the property now is on Little Falls there, was still there, and my recollection is that our daughter gave an oral history interview to Pansy at the farmhouse for the high school when she was here. So this is not a new tradition to get oral histories.
Yes. So what made you want to live in Falls Church?
Well, it was very convenient. I worked at the time for, still with the CIA, worked down at on Constitution Avenue where there was a row of World War II temporary housing. And it was interesting that of course, we had a lot of safes in CIA, and you had to be careful where you put a safe because it would go through the floor if you weren't careful. But I commuted first by bus, then when it was possible, I went to commute by metro as soon as it opened, and I did commute for a while there. And then, of course, CIA up and moved out to Langley after they built the new then building where we actually worked for several years.
So you did work at Langley
Oh, yes.
for a little bit. Okay.
yes.
Okay. So overall, how has Falls Church changed since you moved here in the 1960s?
Oh, my. Well, it's no longer a sleepy little village, as you can tell. It has, the last two councils have pretty much made it a small city and increased the population considerably, as the school people know, and the library is now able to serve that number because it was renovated and enlarged.
Yep. So how do you feel about all the development that's going on in the city?
Oh, I'm of two minds about the large number of high buildings, but you know, you either live or die as a city if you don't have continuing decent revenue, and that's, I suspect, one of the main drivers for all of the current building activity.
Yeah. So you mentioned city council, and you are a spouse of a former mayor.
Yes.
What was it like being the spouse of a mayor?
It was interesting and sometimes quite difficult because she would spend long hours and she would come home exhausted, and yet she was mayor. Sorry, she was on the council from 1974 until 1980. 1990. And she was mayor from 1983 or 4 until 1990, I think. I'm a little fuzzy on the dates there.
Okay, and I don't have them.
Yeah.
But that sounds right.
Anyhow, it's a matter of record when the actual dates are. When Carol was on the council, we would always say, she takes care of the council, and I take care of the church, because I was heavily involved in the church as an elder at the Presbyterian Church, as an elder, and particularly in the financial end of things. So I spent 30 years or more in helping at the church as well. So it's you don't just do one thing exclusively. My activities included the church because I needed something else to occupy my time.
You had many jobs. Were you, so this is about your life. So were you raised Presbyterian?
Yes.
Okay.
I was baptized when I was 6 months old in the Presbyterian Church.
And have you always been a practicing Christian?
Always.
What's the name of the Presbyterian church where you volunteered?
I'm sorry?
What was the name of the Presbyterian church where you volunteered?
Falls Church Presbyterian Church.
Presbyterian. Is that on
Broad
Washington?
Street.
On Broad Street. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But my first Presbyterian church was the Woodland Park Presbyterian Church in Seattle.
So now moving back to Falls Church.
Yep.
Do you remember the first time you visited the library in Falls Church?
It seems to me it was when it was in where the CVS is now. I believe, but that was early on. I've forgotten the day. That was before Mary Riley Stiles Library was built.
So that would, if they were in the CVS, that would have been the first renovation.
Yeah.
So in the 60s. And then they moved back
Yeah, well, of
into
course, we moved here in '60, so that makes sense,
Okay.
time-wise.
What were your impressions of the library in the 1960s when you first came to the City of Falls Church?
It was just another library. I remember the library in Fairbanks, for example. It was a small house structure and in one big room, the whole library. That I just became used to the aspects of how it was housed didn't really matter to me at that time. So my impressions were sort of not very remarkable. I don't really recall exactly what my initial impression was. It's hard to think back 70 years and think what your impression of something was. That's quite a task.
Were the books the important part?
Yes.
Yes. So were you always an avid reader and library visitor?
I'm sorry?
Were you always an avid reader and library visitor?
Yes. I have to say I read a book a day after I retired, and at least a book a day. Now I have to listen to them on tape.
Well, Chet, then you're my role model for retirement. I too would like to read a book a day once I retire. So what were your favorite kinds of things to read?
I'm a particular fan of science fiction. For example, I've read, before my eyesight failed, I've read the entire science fiction collection in our library. And as I said, I was at that time reading a book a day, and so you can cover a lot of ground that way. I also like adventure stories that or historical fiction that sounds a little bit like science fiction, but it's quite different. What if the Nazis had won World War II, for example? There was a whole series of that sort of thing.
Is that The Man in the High Castle?
What ifs, yeah.
So do you think that library services have changed a lot over the years?
Oh yes, they've changed considerably.
Yeah.
Well, the library itself has changed remarkably. The introduction of automation has really kind of revolutionized it, as well as the introduction of CDs and that sort of thing. It's quite different from what it used to be. For instance, when I first started, we had the old card catalog sitting in the library and used it. But, you know, that's now all online.
Yep. So are you using, since reading is difficult now, are you using any of the e-resources listening to books?
What I'm doing, I have joined the group that receives the Library of Congress books on tape, and it's run locally through the Fairfax County system. And I find that after years of rejecting having things read to me, because it was usually too slow, I am a member of that group now, and I do get the Library of Congress books on tape. It always amazes me when they start a book, they say, this will take 13 hours to read. And a book that I could have read in 2 or 3 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any programs or services that you'd like to see at the library in the future?
Well, the library has done an admirable job of covering children's needs and pretty much covering adult needs. I think you will probably continue expanding your net activities, and that's probably the way you're going to have to go in the future.
How did you begin to volunteer at the library?
Well, I was in the library one day getting some books to read, and the librarian asked me if I was interested in helping, because at this time I had just retired. And so I said, sure. And so she put me to work working for her, doing various and sundry jobs. You must remember this is before automation, and so I did such things as shelf reading and that sort of thing. But she then put me on helping in the incoming materials area, and I worked there for most of the rest of the time.
When did you go from volunteering to then being a part of the library board?
Well, let's see. One of the person, I've forgotten his name because I didn't really know him, the vice chair moved away from Falls Church and left an opening. And the library director asked me if I would apply for that, and it was only a short term from, I think, October to June, July. And I said, sure. So that's where I started, was in a unfilled term, unexpired term. I filled that in. And then she asked me to re-up, so I did.
Do you remember what year that was?
That was 94.
Okay.
94.
And who was the library director then? Was that Dean?
Dean,
Dean Dirksen.
yes, Dean Dirksen.
So what kind of work did you do for the board?
Well, mostly board work involves discussions about what the library needs and what the library should be doing and how big the collection should be and that kind of thing. And I just simply participated in that. And there was always discussion about we probably need to upgrade the library, but that didn't really come to a head until early 2000.
Mm-hmm. And
Discussions.
Yeah, and you were a big part of that. Can you talk a little bit about that, the beginnings of this most recent renovation process and project?
Well, yes. Actually, we had talked sort of intermittently about improving the library, and we decided that one of the things that would be helpful would be to have an organization to help support the library.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in late 99 and 2000. So we talked and talked and talked about having a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our members, Rule Pillay, was a lawyer, is a lawyer, and he got tired of talking and took it on himself to set up and do all of the legal work to institute a foundation, including a very nice donation from himself. And Rule, by the way, is the name of one of the archangels.
Oh.
So he was an angel for the library. Then he did that, and that was the sort of the end of his term with the library, and I kind of took over the foundation running, and I remember having a quartet to raise money for the foundation,
Mm-hmm.
For example, once, and we had very good response, and so then we sent letters to a lot of library patrons and other people that we knew to contribute to the foundation for the library. And of course, the foundation is not to replace any funds, but to supplement the city funding for the library. And I think it's done pretty well since then. At one point, a woman who lived in Fairfax County always used our library. Mm-hmm. And when she died, she left $250,000 to the foundation. And that was really the start of the large ability of the foundation to assist the library. Mm-hmm. Although the donations have been, I must say, pretty good even before that, but the public of the city is pretty good about donating to the library.
Mm-hmm. And how long were you with the foundation?
Until my eyesight started failing in about 14 or 15. And I talked to Don about that, and I said, I can no longer read the checks that come in for the foundation. Would you take over that part of the foundation work?
Mm-hmm.
And Don did indeed, and I then just sort of faded out of the picture because I couldn't read the checks, and my eyesight was failing.
Mm-hmm. So recently, the foundation named an award after you that goes towards either a volunteer or a staff person.
I thought that was really quite a compliment. Yes, they did. And we have had two recipients. One was Eric and one was Claudia.
Mm-hmm.
I like that idea.
Good. Yes, to celebrate your dedication and your service to the library. So and loyalty. That's one of the things that we look for or the foundation looks for when they're looking to present the award. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about that we haven't touched on?
Well, no, except I would encourage citizens to get involved in volunteering, whether it be the library or not, because it's really a very satisfying thing to be able to use some of your spare time to assist and help the city. I think our little city has done really quite well in using volunteers. Mm-hmm. So I would encourage it to continue as one of the mainstays of assisting the city government.
And certainly the library benefited from your volunteer experience, thousands of hours to the library in different areas as a volunteer, as the library board member, as board chair, I think, and vice chair at one point, and then, helping out with the foundation as well. So we thank you very much for your service.
It's been great. It's been really great. I've loved all of it.
Good.